Captain Ryan Cross had walked through war zones, alien storms, and shattered moons, but nothing made him feel more unsteady than the echoing halls of the Zelran Palace. The ceilings were made of black glass that reflected stars, and the floor pulsed faintly like the surface of a living heart. The air itself felt alive, thick with strange energy that hummed against his skin. He was humanity's representative, sent to discuss a fragile peace with a species that could crush entire fleets with a thought. Yet as he walked between the towering guards with their silver spears, he was not thinking of treaties. He was thinking of the voice that had summoned him, soft, cold, and curious, the voice of the Queen of Shadows. When the great doors opened, the hall fell silent. Queen Zalara sat upon her throne, made of molten stone and starlight. Her presence was not human in any way. Her skin shimmered like violet glass, her eyes glowing with a deep, endless gold. Every gesture, every breath carried power and stillness. Ryan's instincts screamed at him to bow, to avoid eye contact, but his human curiosity betrayed him. He looked directly into her eyes. For a long, quiet moment, she studied him without a word. Then she tilted her head slightly. "You are the human emissary," she said, her tone slow and melodic, as if she was testing how the word human felt in her mouth. "Yes, Your Majesty," Ryan said carefully, trying to keep his voice steady. "Captain Ryan Cross of Earth Alliance. I come in peace." She leaned forward. "Do you?" Her voice was sharper now, edged with something dangerous. The guards shifted, ready for her signal. Ryan's throat went dry. He could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes watching from the balconies above. He thought of his orders: remain calm, diplomatic, respectful. Do not offend the Queen. But the silence stretched too long. The fear pressed down too heavy. So he smiled, a small human smile, awkward, nervous, but real. "Peace, and maybe a little charm," he said softly. "We humans like to make friends before we make deals." The entire hall froze. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Somewhere, a guard dropped his spear. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He realized too late that he had just flirted with one of the most feared rulers in the galaxy. Queen Zalara's eyes flared gold, bright enough to cast shadows across the room. For a terrifying second, Ryan thought she would strike him down where he stood. But then, slowly, her lips curved into a smile. A faint, dangerous smile that made the entire court bow lower in confusion. "A bold creature," she murmured. "Your kind speaks with fire and laughter, even before death." Ryan straightened, forcing himself to breathe. "I prefer laughter to fear, Your Majesty. It makes the universe a little less empty." The Queen rose from her throne. The movement was fluid, almost liquid, as if gravity itself obeyed her will. She stepped down the obsidian stairs, each footstep echoing like thunder in his chest. She was tall, taller than him, and every inch of her radiated quiet power. She stopped just a breath away. Her gaze softened slightly. "You are not like the others they sent," she said. "Maybe that is why I am still alive," Ryan replied with a faint grin. Her hand lifted, fingers tracing the air near his cheek but not touching. "You are brave," she said, "or foolish." "Sometimes," Ryan said. "It is the same thing." Her expression did not change, but something unseen passed between them. An understanding, a tension that was neither anger nor peace. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. The Queen stepped back, her voice cool again. "You will dine in my hall tonight. The treaty discussions will begin after." "Yes, Your Majesty." He bowed deeply, grateful to still be breathing. But as he turned to leave, he caught the faintest whisper, soft but heavy with meaning. "Do not let him leave." The words came from the Queen herself, spoken so quietly that only her nearest guards could hear. They straightened instantly, their eyes flickering with silent obedience. Ryan did not notice. He only felt the weight of her gaze following him as the massive doors closed behind him. Outside, the corridors felt colder. The alien attendants avoided his eyes, bowing stiffly as he passed. Ryan tried to laugh it off, tried to convince himself that he had survived his first audience with the Queen of Shadows. But deep down, something gnawed at him. That smile, that whisper, the way her eyes seemed to see through every layer of his thoughts. Back in his chamber, he poured himself a glass of the clear Zelrin drink that shimmered like liquid diamond. It tasted sharp and electric. As he sat by the window staring at the twin moons outside, he replayed every word, every look. He could not tell if he had won her curiosity or sealed his fate. Then he heard it, a faint knock at his door. When he opened it, one of the Queen's guards stood there, silent. "Her Majesty requests your presence again," the guard said in a low voice. Ryan blinked. "Now?" The guard nodded once. "Now." Ryan hesitated only a second before following. The corridors twisted like veins of light through darkness. Somewhere deep in his chest, his heart began to pound again, not from fear this time, but from something he did not understand. The Queen of Shadows had smiled at him, and she had just called for him again. He did not know that this was not a meeting for diplomacy. It was the beginning of something much stranger, something that would blur the line between duty and desire, and turn a simple flirtation into the most dangerous bond in the galaxy. Ryan followed the silent guard through endless corridors that seemed to breathe. The walls shimmered faintly, alive with energy that pulsed like veins of light. The sound of his boots echoed softly, the only reminder that he still belonged to a species of flesh and bone. The palace felt like a dream designed to unsettle him, a place where beauty and danger walked hand in hand. He wondered why the Queen had summoned him again so soon. When the doors opened, he stepped into a smaller chamber this time. No court, no audience, no crown upon her head. Queen Zilara stood near a balcony, her long robe flowing like smoke, her back turned to him as she watched the storm of light over the city below. Without looking at him, she said, "Humans confuse me." Ryan froze, unsure if she was speaking to herself or to him. "We confuse ourselves too, Your Majesty," he answered lightly. She turned slowly, her golden eyes unreadable. "You speak as if chaos is an art." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes it is. We paint with mistakes and hope it looks like progress." That made her pause. There was something in her face, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even amusement. She gestured toward a small table covered with crystal dishes and glowing fruit. "Sit," she ordered. Ryan obeyed, trying to hide the tension in his shoulders. The Queen sat across from him, her movements graceful, her gaze sharp. For a long time, neither of them spoke. He could feel the weight of her study, every breath, every heartbeat measured by her silent judgment. Finally, she broke the silence. "Your kind destroyed half your own world before you united. You wage wars and then sing about peace. You flirt before thrones. Tell me, Captain, is that foolishness or courage?" Ryan met her eyes. "Maybe both. But we survive. That is what makes us human." She tilted her head slightly, intrigued. "Survival," she repeated. A simple word with such a strange fire behind it. "We conquer. You persist." He chuckled softly. "Persistence is our version of conquest." Her lips curved into a subtle smile. "You answer boldly for someone who stands before a queen." "Maybe I'm trying to impress you," Ryan said before he could stop himself. The Queen blinked once, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. The sound was low and haunting, like wind moving through glass. The guards outside shifted nervously. They had never heard her laugh before. "You are reckless, human," she said, her voice soft but filled with something new. "Your tongue dances on the edge of danger." "Where I come from," Ryan said, leaning slightly forward. "That is called diplomacy." The Queen's smile faded, replaced by curiosity. "Do all humans speak as you do?" "Some do. Most just talk too much," he admitted. "But we all believe in connection, even when it's risky." Her gaze drifted away for a moment, as if his words had touched something inside her. "Connection," she said quietly. "An idea both fragile and dangerous." Ryan noticed the change in her tone, softer, almost wistful. "Does that mean the Queen of Shadows is lonely?" he asked gently. The room turned cold. The air grew heavy. Even the lights dimmed. For a second, Ryan thought he had gone too far. But instead of rage, she looked thoughtful. "Lonely," she whispered. "Do you think power removes loneliness, Captain?" Ryan shook his head. "No. It just makes it harder to find someone brave enough to sit across from you." Her eyes glimmered. "And you think you are brave enough?" "I am here, aren't I?" he said softly. A long silence followed. The Queen's expression softened again, and for the first time, Ryan saw something almost human in her, curiosity mixed with a trace of admiration. "You are an unusual creature," she said finally. "You hide your fear behind humor. You face death with charm. Perhaps that is why your species survives where others fall." Ryan smiled. "Maybe that's why I am still in this room." She stood then, walking toward the balcony. Her robe shimmered with each step, catching the faint glow of the city lights. "Tell me something, Captain," she said, her voice distant but calm. "What does humanity dream of when the wars are over and the stars are silent?" Ryan thought for a long moment. "Peace," he said. "Not just the kind written in treaties, but the kind that feels like home." The Queen turned back, studying him carefully. "And do you have such a home?" "Not anymore," he said quietly. "I left it behind long ago." Something flickered in her gaze, understanding or perhaps sympathy. Then softly she said, "Perhaps that is why you speak to me so freely. You have nothing left to lose." "Or maybe I have everything to gain," he replied. For the first time the Queen looked away, her voice low. "You speak like one who does not fear me." Ryan rose slowly from his seat. "Maybe I don't, maybe I should. But right now all I see is someone trying to understand what makes us human." She studied him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Finally she spoke. "You will remain in the palace as my crown guest. I wish to learn more about your kind," he hesitated. "Guest? Do you object?" Ryan smiled faintly. "That depends. Do your guests ever get to leave?" Her golden eyes gleamed. "Only when I am done with them." He laughed softly, though unease twisted inside him. "Then I hope you are not easily bored, Your Majesty." The Queen smiled again, that same mysterious curve of her lips that unsettled him earlier. "We shall see, Captain. Tomorrow we speak again." As he turned to leave, the door closed behind him without a sound. Ryan walked through the glowing halls, his thoughts a storm. He could not tell if he was walking away from danger or toward something far more consuming. In her chamber, Queen Zylara watched him through the mirrored walls, her expression unreadable. For centuries, she had ruled empires, destroyed armies, and bent galaxies to her will. Yet now, for the first time, she felt something unfamiliar. A quiet pull, a curiosity that refused to fade. The human had made her laugh. And that, she decided, was dangerous. The moonlight spilled through the open balcony as Ryan stood at the edge of his quarters, gazing out over the Zelran city below. The sprawling metropolis stretched far into the horizon, glittering like stars on the dark surface of a planet. Everything about this place seemed impossible. Too bright, too alien, too far from everything he had known. But the longer he spent here, the more its strange beauty crept into his thoughts, luring him deeper into a world he never imagined. A knock at the door shattered the stillness. He knew it before it even happened. This time it wasn't a request. It was a command. Ryan opened the door, and there stood the same silent guard who had led him to the Queen before. "Her Majesty requests your presence." "Immediately," the guard said, his voice flat, emotionless. Ryan glanced back at the moonlit balcony, the open sky that reminded him of everything he had left behind. He took a deep breath, forced a smile, and followed the guard. The palace corridors felt colder this time, the walls darker, as if the palace itself had shifted, sensing the tension in the air. Ryan's thoughts raced. The Queen had summoned him again, but this wasn't a diplomatic meeting. He had no delusions about that. He had caught glimpses of the Queen's curiosity in her eyes, but what did it mean? Did she see him as a curiosity, something to be studied, dissected? Or was it something else entirely? When they arrived at her chambers, the guard motioned for him to enter. The door opened with a quiet hiss and Ryan stepped inside. Queen Zylara was standing by the same balcony looking out at the distant stars. Her back was to him, but the room felt different tonight. The air was heavier, charged with something he couldn't name. "Captain," she said without turning around, her voice smooth, almost like a caress. "I trust you are adjusting to our hospitality?" Ryan hesitated, unsure of how to answer. The truth was he hadn't adjusted at all. Every minute spent here felt like an unraveling, his mission slipping further from his grasp with each passing hour. "It's strange," he admitted, "but I'm getting by." There was a pause, as if she was considering his answer. Then she turned, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The subtle movement of her robe made it seem as though she were floating, an ethereal being standing in front of him. "Strange," she repeated, stepping closer. "Yes, it must be. Your kind is so different from anything I've known. So fragile, yet so bold." Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but she silenced him with a small gesture. "You think you understand the universe?" she continued, her voice growing softer. "But you do not. You only exist within it, stumbling blindly toward your next survival. And yet you are intriguing." Ryan swallowed, feeling the weight of her words. There was something in her tone, something that felt like both admiration and danger. She took another step toward him, so close now that he could feel the warmth of her presence. Her eyes, those golden orbs, seemed to penetrate through him. "Tell me, Captain Cross, do you fear me?" He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but the word stuck. Fear. The question hung in the air, thick and heavy, pressing down on him. He had faced danger all his life. He had stared down death on countless occasions. But this felt different. This felt like something far more insidious, something he couldn't touch, couldn't understand. "No," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "I'm not afraid of you." The Queen's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Interesting. You are the first to say that." She moved closer still until there was barely any space between them. Ryan could feel her breath, warm and steady against his skin. His pulse quickened. He didn't know why he felt so alive in this moment, why the air seemed to crackle with an unspoken tension. "You should be afraid," she whispered, her voice almost too soft to hear. "You are standing in my presence where few mortals have ever stood. You are a mere human and I am an immortal queen. But you do not fear me." Ryan's heart raced in his chest, and for a moment he felt like a thread suspended over a great abyss. The danger was not in her power, but in her presence. How she made him question everything he knew about himself, about the universe. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked, his voice low. She tilted her head, studying him as if weighing the question against something deeper. "What do you think I want, Captain?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The answer was too complicated, too dangerous. But the way she looked at him, as if she could see into his very soul, left him unable to look away. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The sounds of the palace, the distant hum of the world outside, even his own thoughts. Then, in a move so swift it took his breath away, she reached out and touched his arm. It wasn't a casual touch. It was an act of ownership, a claim that sent a shiver through him. Her fingers were cool, but the moment they made contact, he felt a surge of warmth flood his chest. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face. Her eyes glowed brighter now, almost blinding in their intensity. "I want you to stay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Not as a prisoner, not as a guest, but as something more. Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but she silenced him again, this time with a kiss. Soft, gentle, yet impossible to ignore. Her lips brushed his with a tenderness that caught him off guard, leaving him stunned, breathless. When she pulled away, the world seemed to spin. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest, the silence stretching between them like an eternity. "Now you understand," she whispered, her voice thick with meaning. "You are no longer just a visitor. You are mine." The words hung in the air, and Ryan, for the first time, understood the weight of her power. It wasn't just her strength, her empire, or her alien influence. It was her ability to ensnare him, to twist the very air around him until there was nothing left but her. And somewhere deep inside, he knew he would never be the same again. The days blurred together after that night. Ryan spent his time in the palace, caught in a strange limbo where his every move felt scrutinized. The Queen's presence loomed over him like an invisible weight. It was as if he had been marked, not just by her touch, but by something deeper, something that bound him to her in ways he could not fully understand. He wasn't a prisoner. Not yet. But the walls around him were closing in with every passing hour. The Queen had given him freedom, but it came with invisible chains, one he could feel tightening each time her gaze rested on him. Each time her attendants watched him from the shadows. Every conversation, every meeting was filled with unspoken tension. Zilara had never again directly commanded him to stay, but her presence was enough. The subtle gestures, the silent orders, everything about this place spoke of her power over him. Even his dreams were haunted by her eyes, her voice pulling him deeper into her world. Ryan tried to focus on his mission, to remember why he was here. But every day he found himself drawn into her orbit, caught between the fragile diplomacy of his people and the storm of emotions he couldn't control. The Queen was not just a ruler. She was an enigma, a force that defied logic. And now, after everything, he was more confused than ever. His thoughts were interrupted one morning as a guard entered his chamber. "Her Majesty requests your presence," the soldier said, his tone unyielding. Ryan stood, not needing to ask why. It was always the same. The Queen wanted something, and he was expected to comply whether he liked it or not. The walls seemed to pulse around him as he followed the guard through the winding halls, his steps heavier with each footfall. When he arrived at the Queen's private chamber, he was surprised to find that it was empty. No attendants, no guards. Just Zilara, standing by the large obsidian window that overlooked the palace grounds. Her back was to him, and the air felt thick with anticipation. "Captain Cross," she said without turning. Her voice was distant, almost cold. "You wonder what it is that draws you here, do you not?" Ryan swallowed. There was no denying the truth of her words. He had asked himself that question more times than he cared to admit. He had tried to fight it, tried to keep his distance, but there was something in her that called to him, something magnetic, pulling him deeper into her world. "You know the answer," he said, his voice rough. "Do I?" She turned slowly, her gaze sharp and piercing. She took a step toward him, her eyes never leaving his face. "I know that you think you are here for some noble cause, that you are the brave captain sent to save humanity. But you are not. You are here because I allowed it. Because I want you here." Her words stung, and Ryan felt a bitter taste in his mouth. "And if I wanted to leave?" he asked, his voice betraying a flicker of defiance. The Queen's lips curled into a smile, but it was not one of amusement. It was the smile of someone who knew that no matter how far he ran, Ryan would never escape. "You think you have a choice?" she asked softly. "You think you can walk away from this? From me?" "I have seen your mind, Captain. I have felt your hesitation, your longing to escape. But the truth is, you are mine now, and I have no intention of letting you go." Ryan's heart raced and his breath caught in his chest. The words should have terrified him, but they didn't. In some twisted way, they gave him a sense of clarity. This wasn't about survival anymore. It wasn't about diplomacy. It was about something far more dangerous, something he could neither fight nor understand. "You think I'm your prisoner," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "But you're wrong. I'm not afraid of you." For the first time since he had arrived, the Queen's expression shifted. There was something almost sad in her eyes, as if she had been expecting this moment for far longer than he had. "You are not afraid of me," she whispered, stepping closer, her voice almost tender. "And that is why I cannot let you go." Her hand reached out, and before Ryan could react, she touched his cheek. The coolness of her fingers sent a shiver down his spine, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, something he couldn't explain. "I have never known someone like you, Captain," she said, her voice soft but filled with an undeniable weight. "You do not bend. You do not break. Even when you are caught in my web, you resist." Ryan didn't know what to say. He didn't know if he was resisting or if he had already lost. His mind raced, but his body remained still, caught in the moment between her touch and the dark pull of her presence. "You are a prisoner," she continued, her voice low, almost hypnotic. "Not in the way you think. You are free to leave, Captain, but you will always return. You will always come back to me, because you cannot escape the pull I have over you. You are mine." Ryan could feel his breath catch in his chest as her words settled into him, deeper than anything else she had said. There was no anger, no threat, only a truth that cut deeper than any weapon. The Queen's fingers slid from his cheek, trailing down his jaw, and for a moment, Ryan thought he might lose himself completely. But then she pulled away and the spell was broken just for a moment. Go, she said, her voice now distant. Rest. Tomorrow we speak again. But as he left the chamber, the weight of her words lingered like a shadow over his mind. She was right. He was a prisoner, not of chains, but of something far more dangerous, the power she held over him. And no matter how far he ran, no matter how many times he tried to escape, he knew deep down that he would always return. Because she was right. He was hers. The palace was alive with whispers. They passed through the corridors like the wind, quiet, subtle, yet brimming with tension. Ryan could feel it in the air. The servants' furtive glances, the way the guards moved, a little too rigid, a little too watchful. It was as if the entire palace was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was coming. Queen Zylara had not called for him for days after their last meeting. At first, Ryan welcomed the quiet. It gave him time to think, to wrestle with the emotions that had been growing inside him like a storm he could not control. But the more time he spent alone in his quarters, the more he realized something was off. The Queen's touch still lingered on his skin, a reminder of her power. He couldn't forget her words. You are mine. He had tried to push them aside, to tell himself that this was all part of some game, some alien manipulation. But there was something in her eyes, something in her voice, that made it impossible to see her as anything other than an unyielding force. A force that had gotten under his skin, deeper than anything he had ever known. Then came the morning when it all changed. Ryan had barely eaten breakfast when a group of soldiers, their armor gleaming in the early light, came to his door. They didn't speak at first, just stood there as if waiting for something. Captain Cross, one of them said, finally breaking the silence. You are to accompany us. The Queen requires your presence. Ryan frowned. He hadn't heard anything from her. The absence had been unnerving, but this sudden order felt different. His instincts screamed at him that something was wrong. As he followed the soldiers through the winding hallways, a sickening realization began to settle in. The tension in the air wasn't just the usual palace politics. Something was happening, something more dangerous than just the Queen's strange hold over him. They stopped outside a large chamber, its doors thick and imposing, carved with ancient symbols. The soldiers stepped aside without a word, allowing him to enter. What greeted him inside was far different from anything he had expected. Queen Zylara stood before the throne, her face hard and unreadable. Around her were several high-ranking members of her council, their faces grim. But it wasn't the council that caught his attention. It was the sight of a prisoner kneeling in front of the Queen. The prisoner was human. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He didn't recognize the man, but the sight of him, dirty, beaten, with bruises covering his face, struck a chord deep in Ryan's chest. The man's eyes were wide with terror, his hands bound tightly behind his back. What is this? Ryan demanded, stepping forward. The Queen turned slowly, her eyes locking onto his. There was no hint of warmth in them, no trace of the tenderness she had shown him in their private moments. She was the Queen again, the ruler of an empire, cold and calculating. Do not question me, Captain, she said, her voice low but sharp. This man is a traitor. He plotted against me. Ryan's eyes flicked to the prisoner, confusion and anger rising inside him. A traitor? Yes, Zylara said, her tone laced with ice. He thought he could overthrow me, lead a rebellion against my rule. His fate is sealed. Ryan's stomach twisted. He could feel the weight of the prisoner's gaze on him, pleading, desperate. He didn't know why, but something in that look made him hesitate. Your Majesty, Ryan said, trying to keep his voice calm. If this man is a traitor, why are you showing him mercy? Why not execute him right away? The Queen's gaze hardened. Because I wanted to see what you would do, Captain. Ryan blinked, caught off guard. What? You are the first human I've allowed to stay this long. The first to see me not as a queen, but as a ruler. You claim to understand your kind's resilience. You say that you value connection. Now I ask you, do you value it enough to save a life? Ryan stared at her, struggling to find the words. The Queen's question felt like a trap. There was no winning here. If he tried to intervene to save the man, he risked angering her. But if he stayed silent, he would be complicit in this cruel display of power. The man's desperate gaze pierced through Ryan's thoughts. Please help me. He knew what he had to do. Let him go, Ryan said, his voice strong despite the tension in the room. If you truly want to understand humanity, you should know that we don't kill for power. We protect each other, even when it's difficult. Even when it's dangerous. The Queen's eyes narrowed. The room grew colder, the weight of her gaze heavier than ever before. You would sacrifice yourself for him? She asked, her voice laced with mockery. For a traitor? Ryan didn't flinch. He may be a traitor to you, but he's a man to me, and I will not stand by while you decide who lives or dies based on your whims. The tension in the room was thick enough to suffocate. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure of how to react. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Queen Zylara took a step back, her eyes cold but unreadable. You are a fool, Captain Cross, she said, her tone betraying a hint of something darker. But perhaps that is why I find you so interesting. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know if he had just signed his own death sentence or if he had done the right thing. But he couldn't let this man die. Not like this, not in front of him. You may go, the Queen said coldly, her voice now laced with finality. But know this, Captain. This rebellion within my palace has only just begun, and when the time comes, you will have to choose where your loyalties lie. Ryan nodded once, his stomach still churning with the weight of her words. As he turned to leave, he could feel her eyes on his back, a presence that followed him, a shadow that refused to let go. And as the doors closed behind him, Ryan knew that the Queen's hold over him had only deepened. He was no longer just a guest. He was a pawn in a game he didn't fully understand, a game where every move carried consequences. But he also knew one thing for sure. He could never walk away from this fight. Not now, not after what he had just witnessed.